What if I told you that there was once a country with a deep state, much more heinous and much more powerful than anything that ever was imagined in America? We know about the deep state theories in the United States, so if you're watching this, stop typing in the comments. But that said, the nation I'm talking about is Japan, and the aftermath of this was in 1945 when we dropped the first nuclear bomb in history on Hiroshima on August 6th of 1945, and then the second one on the port city of Nagasaki on August 9th of 1945. It is in the wake of this that this deep state in Japan kicked into action, and the short answer is that Japan at the time was also an absolute monarchy with a single head of state and officially a single ruler, Emperor Hirohito. And he shortly after the Nagasaki bombing decided that he had enough. He wanted to end the war. He wanted to unconditionally surrender to the United States in the Pacific Ocean. This decision was made sometime on August 10th or August 11th of 1945. But here's where that deep state government kicks in. You see, well, Hirohito was an absolute monarch. He had an inner circle, which ironically had democratic elections to make decisions on critical items such as this. That committee typically had 10 members in it, and it was, in this case, a 5-5 tie. Now, in this situation, much like the U.S. Senate, the emperor gets to break the tie. And he appealed to the appeals of those that were more peaceful or peace-desiring, won the day. But on the other side, there was the Japanese Imperial Army and Navy. Their leaders wanted to continue the war. And the military had Hirohito's ear on a very regular basis, just this being the one exception. And they usually did carry the day in matters back in 1945 and throughout much of World War II, including the decision to bomb Pearl Harbor back in 1941. This shadow government that had the power was basically a military junta. Hirohito was the face of the decisions, but really a lot of the decisions involving the war, production, and even economic matters in World War II were held by these top generals. Now, I did not practice trying to pronounce their names because it's irrelevant for this point. But what these men did next shocks most everybody when they first hear it. They actually hatched a plot. Hirohito had already recorded his surrender announcement to the country. However, at this point, that military junta, or leaders of the Army and Navy of the Japanese Imperial Armed Forces, they hatched a plan to kidnap the emperor, lock him away, and destroy the tapes. Did it work? No. Because others found out about the plot, informed the emperor, and it was stopped before it could be done. When the Emperor Hirohito was seen almost as a mythical or godlike figure by the Japanese public, such that when the announcement tapes were played over Japanese radio, I believe it was August 12th of 1945, it was the first time that many of the citizens had ever heard his voice. An absolute monarch who was never visible. Basically the antithesis of North Korea today, where you can't get away from the Kim dynasty or Kim Jong-un. This was the opposite. This was an emperor who ruled from behind the curtains where nobody had ever known who he was or had ever heard the sound of his voice. The closest contemporary comparison to this would be in Afghanistan with the Taliban. And back in the 2010s, their leader Mullah Omar, there were only limited pictures of this man. His voice could be heard occasionally on Afghan radio, but he never made a public appearance, and neither did Emperor Hirohito. So this shadow government operated as a shadow behind the shadow. So this deep state in Japan was military, and it hatched a very evil plot. Would they have killed the emperor? I believe not, and I'll tell you why, because of that Japanese public I just mentioned. If it had ever gotten out that they had done any harm to the emperor, there would have been vigilante justice, I believe, because that's how the public held the emperor in 1945. Now, of course, Japan today, as part of the condition of the surrender, which was signed on the USS Missouri on August 15th of 1945, part of the condition of that was that the emperor, the imperial monarchy, would be allowed to remain in a limited format, limited fashion, which is where they exist today. So it's 2025. It's been 80 years of this now, where Japan does have a monarch. It has a emperor, crown prince, and a royal family, much like the Brits do. But in addition to this, they also, of course, have an elected legislature that actually really makes the governing decisions for the country. And so whoever the prime minister is, much like Canada and the Brits with their Westminster system, that is a similar system that is in place in Japan today. So Japan uses basically the Westminster system for their governance. And therefore, the idea of a shadow military government really can't exist today. In fact, they weren't really allowed to rebuild their military. And even today, it's still limited in scope. Basically just to prevent a repeat of their role in the Axis Alliance during World War II. So there it is. The Japanese shadow government that nobody knew about, that was the shadow behind the shadow. The Japanese Imperial Army and Navy. It's Friday for real this time. You folks have a good weekend. I will see you tomorrow. And as always, peace out, homies.